Okay, so hi, my name is Alexis COF, and I'm going to be doing my speech on animal testing and how it's ineffective. So the reasons why animal testing is ineffective is because almost all experiments that have been researched and experimented with are unsuccessful, as well as it's a waste of time and money. And humans and animals have different functions, and the way that we're structured is completely different. So with my first reasoning of experiments are unsuccessful, the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration, has stated, and they also regulate the drugs, and they are the ones that tell the markets if they're able to sell them to the people. They're the ones that stated that 9 out of 10 drugs were successful in animal tests but failed in human clinical trials. So that just shows that 90% of the experiments that have been made on animal testing has been ineffective and unsuccessful. So that almost puts us back in a way that we're not advancing ourselves in the medical field because we are wasting time and money on these experiments, which leads me to my second point, which is waste of time and money. The National Institute of Health did a research project, and it was on sepsis, which is a life-threatening systematic infection. So they experimented on 150 drugs, and they injected these mice with sepsis disease. And so what they did was they experimented on the mice, but they came out positive, all of them. So they were able to cure the sepsis inside the mouse. But when it came to actually giving it to the humans and doing it in a human clinical trial, all of them failed. So they stated that they wasted decades of research and billions of dollars on this one research project. So that means scientists were using 20 and 30 years of their work experience on this project, and nothing was able to be cured or advanced. So this is almost putting us back, as well as we're losing lives over this, since people are waiting for this drug to come out and these researchers to cure their disease, and they're just dying because they're not able to find an actual method for it. The Humane Society International also stated in 2013 that over 26 million animals are killed in laboratories each year. So not only are we wasting time and money, but we're also killing these innocent animals when it's not really helping us or them. So even though people say like it's just mice and it's just dogs and cats, and we have a lot of those in the world, they are still a part of the animal cycle, and they still mean something to everybody, and we can't just kill them off for our own purposes, even though it's still not even helping us. Which also leads me to my third point, which is animals' functions and bodies differ from humans. So the Anecdote Europe in 2014 stated every species of animals has a unique genetic code, and the genetic code determines the structure of proteins that ensure the biological activities associated with the species. So 2 different species will produce different proteins and evident in terms of the biological activity. So this just means that we have different genetic codes between us and animals, and that means that we will not be fighting diseases the same way that animals fight diseases. So even though the mice are being cured, does not mean we will be cured, and that has been shown with the 90% unsuccessful rate from the animal trials to the human trials. And the NIH, which is the National Institute of Health, has also stated that they will be spending $70 million on trying to figure out how the mice or their genetic codes are like close to ours. But even with that, it's still going to take lots of decades to figure out how we would be able to correlate at them. So in conclusion, we are only putting ourselves back, and we're not helping ourselves by just focusing on animal experiments. So we need to find other methods since animal testing is ineffective. Thank you.
Alexis, at the beginning of the speech, you identified the topic, but the way the proposition is presented, it sounds like it's an informative speech. I'm going to tell you how animal testing is ineffective. You want there you are. You want a declarative statement there. You don't want it to be a question or a passive statement. You want an active statement. I'm not going to tell you how it's ineffective. My claim is animal testing is ineffective. And I think you should also be specific about in what way it's ineffective. It's ineffective in developing new medications or treatments for disease or something like that. I think it needs to be a little bit more complete than what you have. The same sort of thing is true of the secondary claims. You do tell us what the secondary structure is going to be, so there is a preview, but most of the phrasing on that is similarly ambiguous. It's not using the declarative sentences. You've got the passive kind of way of making those arguments, and it's much more effective and clear if you can use the declarative statements. So organizationally, it's fine. I would also suggest looking at this. I think that you would probably want to have your third point in the second position, because I think it fits closer to that first point than the middle point does. It seems like the middle point is kind of irrelevant to the other 2 points, and the other 2 points are kind of connected to each other. Even though they are distinct ideas, I think would make a little bit more sense to organize it that way. You did a good job citing those points as you got to them. That was fine. I think there are some assumptions that are being made here that need to be explained and documented more. You seem to assume that because 90% of the medications or the 90% of the tests did not result in a human outcome, that there was no value to those tests. And I think that's a big presupposition that needs a little bit more explanation. What's the famous example? I think it's Thomas Edison who talked about it takes 10,000 chances or 8,000 opportunities to get to the one that works, but you don't get to those unless you make those mistakes and failures to begin with. You're kind of assuming that there's never going to be an outcome on that. I think that you need to make a stronger argument on that. I've heard this statistic a lot. This is not the first time I've heard this argument, obviously, and I think it's an important piece of information, but I think that people are making inferences from it that need to be argued a little bit more. You seem to think that the statistic makes the argument adequately for you, and I think you have to make a stronger explanation of what your inference is on that particular point. Right before you get to the third point, when you're on the second point, you do get a little sidetracked onto a value issue, and I think that you probably want to stay away from that, although I can imagine that you're kind of anticipating this is a rebuttal issue that somebody's going to bring up, or just rats and mice and that sort of thing, and you're trying to respond to it. I don't think you can respond to it without getting into the value argument, and I think it would be easier for us to dismiss their position, assuming they made that answer as a value argument, if you hadn't already introduced it. So probably better to just keep that out of the discussion and just talk about whether or not it's effective at producing an outcome. The cost issue that you had in that middle point relies primarily on the single study, and it sounded to me like there's a conclusion that's being made there, but I don't know that the conclusion was arrived at by the people that did the study. We wasted decades and billions of dollars. I don't know if that's your inference, if you're quoting somebody, or if the people that you might be quoting are the people who did the test itself. If it's your conclusion, you got to explain it a little bit more. If it's the testimony of the people who did the study, that's great evidence that would be a good example of reluctant testimony, and you ought to be citing it directly. Tell us who said it, what their role in the research was, and that's going to enhance the credibility of your argument. I think that would be a good way to present that particular point. You do a nice job speaking to the audience. I just think some of the supporting material is underwhelming at advancing that particular point, and you have a little bit more time, so I think you could probably do that. I did think that at the end of the speech you did give us a clearer statement of what your proposition was than you had at the beginning, where you just basically says animal testing is ineffective. All right, thank you.